Welcome to This Explainer. I want you to step back in time with me for a minute. Let's step out of the modern world, right into the dim, freezing cold morning light of the 19th century. We're going to reconstruct an entire human reality today. And we're not doing it through, the grand sweep of wars or the decrees of kings, but through the deeply personal, visceral experience of ordinary women. We're looking at the material culture that totally shaped their everyday existence. We'll analyze how the seemingly simple, private ritual of getting dressed literally constructed the physical, social, and moral boundaries of the entire Victorian era.
Okay, let's dive into this. When we look back at the 19th century, it's so easy to just view their clothing as, well, quaint fashion. But for the Victorian woman, these garments were not just fabric. They were a complex, heavy architecture. To put on these clothes was to submit to a literal system of structural engineering, one that dictated her posture, her breathing, her physical independence, and exactly where she stood in the social hierarchy. Every single layer was a physical manifestation of societal constraints.
Section 1. Architecture of the Toilet. Building the Victorian Woman.
You see, getting dressed wasn't just mere grooming. It was this meticulous sequence of assembly built from the skin outward. First up came the chemise, a really simple linen or cotton garment just to protect the skin. Next, the drawers, and then the absolute foundational structural element, the corset. This was constructed of dense cotton, steel busks, and whalebone. Once the torso was literally locked into this rigid embrace, the petticoats were added, and we're talking sometimes up to 6 layers of heavy, starched cotton, wool, or even horsehair, all just dragging at the waist. Before a woman even put on her actual dress, she was already carrying this tremendous, exhausting weight that inherently limited how she could move.
Section 2. Engineering the silhouette, the physical reality.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the profound impact these hidden layers had on the human body. Historical consensus reveals this deep, totally unresolved anxiety of the era, which we call the corset controversy. Medical professionals back then vigorously debated the physiological dangers of tight lacing. They were citing things like organ compression and weakened back muscles. But simultaneously, fashion arbiters and moralists argued that a tightly laced corset was an absolute necessity. They claimed it was required for female respectability, upright moral posture, and proper support. As historians, we have to look at this objectively and understand that women were caught squarely in the middle of this intense cultural and medical crossfire. So why on earth did they endure this? Well, because these constraints were the very structures of societal approval. The corset restricted breathing, and it forced a distinctly rigid, upright posture that made bending over or reaching upwards nearly impossible. It functioned, essentially, as a physical mechanism of social control. By limiting mobility, the clothing ensured that a respectable woman remained in a dependent, subservient role. She literally could not perform strenuous labor or navigate the world rapidly without physical distress or, the assistance of others.
Section 3. The fabric of wealth, class, and economics.
Let's elevate our perspective for a second, away from just the physical body to the broader economic systems that governed these choices. The reality of the Victorian toilet starkly divided the classes. An upper-class woman deliberately wore fragile, delicate fabrics that were nearly impossible to clean. This was entirely intentional. It was visual proof that she didn't have to do manual labor. Her daily routine required immense leisure time. She'd change outfits for the morning, for afternoon visiting, for dinner, and then evening events, relying entirely on the labor of a lady's maid just to manage all those complex fastenings. Conversely, a working or middle-class woman, she had to dress herself. She used practical, durable fabrics and wore fewer layers simply so she could survive the intense physical demands of her daily labor.
And this brilliantly illustrates the relentless arms race of social status. Think about it. Before the sewing machine, extreme wealth was displayed through hours and hours of painstaking hand embroidery and elaborate trimmings. But once industrialization allowed the middle class to replicate these trimmings quickly by machine, the upper classes had to invent new barriers. So the wealthy pivoted. To distinguish themselves, they began requiring a dizzying array of highly specific, super delicate dresses for every distinct time of day. They made the simple act of existing impossibly expensive and complicated.
Furthermore, we've got to understand the economics of textiles in the 19th century. Human labor was incredibly cheap, but manufactured fabric was exceptionally expensive. Therefore, those massive, wide skirts of the 1850s and 60s, the ones that required immense yardage to construct, they were not just a fashion trend. They were a deliberate, highly visible proclamation of a family's financial dominance. A woman walking into a room in a 12-yard silk skirt was essentially wearing the equivalent of a modern luxury vehicle.
Section 4. Etiquette and Physical Reality. Navigating the World. This brings us to how a woman completely encased in this expensive, restrictive architecture was actually expected to move through the public sphere. The public world was a literal minefield of behavioral expectations, and all of it was intimately tied to her clothing. As Emily Thornwell's 19th century etiquette manuals reveal, women were advised, with absolute earnestness, mind you, to never look too frequently to the left or right while walking in a city, lest they invite impertinent advances. The sheer anxiety of public life meant that a woman's gaze, her gait, and the management of her massive skirts were constantly under extreme societal surveillance. Now, these rules might seem a bit absurd to our modern sensibilities, but back then, they were absolute survival mechanisms. Because her clothing made her physically vulnerable and, honestly, quite clumsy, a woman was instructed to always accept a gentleman's help, which constantly reinforced her dependence. There were strict, agonizing guidelines on precisely how to pinch and raise a dress hem above the mud without showing a scandalous glimpse of an ankle. Every single meal, every walk down the street, every social interaction was this heavily monitored performance, tightly corseted by both literal steel and intense societal pressure.
Section 5. The Quest for Comfort. The Private Sphere.
So how did human beings actually survive this? Well, they sought refuge. There was a profound sensory and physical divide between their public armor and their private sanctuary. When a woman finally returned home and those public doors closed, the grueling architecture was systematically dismantled. Just imagine the absolute relief of unlacing that corset and slipping into loose-fitting wrappers or combing jackets. It must have been a profound physical exhalation. In the private sphere, women actively reclaimed their breath, their mobility, and their bodily autonomy. This deep desire for comfort birthed a really fascinating garment, the tea gown. It was this revolutionary hybrid. It was beautiful and fashionable enough to wear while entertaining close friends in the parlor, but its defining feature was that it was designed to be worn without a corset. It was this rare, rebellious loophole in the super strict Victorian dress code, giving women a measure of actual physical freedom without sacrificing an ounce of their social dignity. So the crucial point here is that women did not just simply accept this confinement forever. Towards the end of the century, ordinary people aggressively pushed back. They sparked the rational dress movement. Women demanded the basic human right to physical mobility. They boldly rejected extreme corsetry. They advocated for sensible bloomers and cycling costumes so they could ride bicycles independently. And they finally began to prioritize their own health and vitality over just acting as a display case for their family's wealth. Step by step, they started dismantling the very architecture that bound them. As we leave the 19th century and return to the present day, it's really worth reflecting on what we've learned in this explainer. The Victorian woman's reality was shaped by visible steel, whalebone, and yards of heavy silk. But every society has its rules. What expectations, what invisible structures, and what societal corsets dictate how you move, dress, and live today? It's a question that shows just how connected we really are to the past. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into history.